The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Man podcast, a podcast centered around self-mastery. I'm your host, Zach Schenken. It is time for the somewhat long-awaited, and I guess to those that have made it because you saw my thread on Twitter or are just curious to hear about my 5-day fast and silent retreat, welcome. I suppose I may have successfully garnered some anticipation, which is kind of cool, the build-up of what was a pretty interesting experience, which I'll go into hopefully at depth, answer some questions that I didn't address directly within the thread that I wrote. Obviously wanted to keep that somewhat limited as the medium permitted, but with a podcast, I can kind of go into some of my mindset, a little bit longer form discussion on the experience itself, how I felt about it, takeaways, day-to-day, all that kind of stuff. So I do hope that you find this interesting, enlightening, answer some questions about this type of experience. I am coming to the realization, the more conversations I have about it, that it's maybe more uncommon than I thought or anticipated. I had put it on my list of things to do for 2023, like my list of goals. And one of my friends asked me the other day, like, why was that on that list in the first place? Like, when did the idea first come to you? And I'm not totally certain that I can point to a reason why. I felt like it would be an experience that I wanted to try out. I think the first time I heard of anything like it, like a Vipassana meditation or a silent retreat, was actually an old Tim Ferriss video. He talked about going on a 10-day silent retreat, kind of facilitated by these monks, and how kind of an intense experience it was. And I thought that was interesting. I think Tim Ferriss is a extremely fascinating guy, one of the first people in the self-development world, uncommon life path world that I was exposed to, reading, the 4-Hour Workweek way back in high school and listening to some of his OG podcasts. So I think that's probably where it was first incepted into my mind. But why this year, and then why for my 24th birthday was something that I looked to do. I think a lot of us young adults, and really after, I don't know what age, but it seems like there's just a cutoff where birthdays don't really mean as much, or they're not like a big celebration. You're not asking for some sort of toy. And once you make your own money, you typically have all of the things that you want. And so, of course, your parents always want to do something for you. And, parents were like, what do you want for your birthday this year? And because this was on my list and because I didn't have anything else to ask for, it just kind of all fell into alignment. And I was like, will you just drop me in the woods for a week and facilitate the experience? So rented a cabin in the North Georgia mountains area. And that was the inception kind of motivation of the idea. I think that very quickly into the experience, like almost immediately upon getting dropped off, I realized that I had not thought through what I had gotten myself into, and realized it was going to be a lot more challenging than I thought. I consider myself a pretty resilient, disciplined, all of the above type of person, but maybe I just didn't put enough direct thought into what was really going to happen, but it was harder than I anticipated. And I think that the two challenges themselves, like a 5-day fast and a 5-day silent retreat, are both challenging and challenges in of themselves. But when put together, I think I had in my mind assumed or unconsciously made the assumption that they were somehow going to detract from each other, where, if I'm focused on being hungry, I can look at the different challenge of the mental side and it would distract from the physical hunger, and vice versa. But I think instead they kind of amplified, where if you're fasting for 5 days, and for those of you who have done any amount of fasting, whether it's just an intermittent 16-hour not eating window or a 24-hour fast, 72, whatever, that like it's easy to distract yourself from being hungry when you're busy. So that whether that be reading, whether that be your job, whether that just be walking around, communicating with other people, it's pretty easy to not focus on the hunger. But when you have literally nothing coming in input wise, and you're not talking to anyone, you're not reading anything, and you're just there alone, it was very easy to fixate on the discomfort of the hunger. So it ended up being a lot more of an intense and what I would classify as difficult. I think a lot of difficulty is just mindset, but it was far harder than I anticipated. But for today's discussion, I will obviously go kind of rambly. I structured the thread that I broke down, and for those that haven't read it, maybe you're just hearing this, I wrote a thread on Twitter, which is currently pinned on my profile, which I'll link in the description of the show notes if you're interested in reading out kind of what I wrote. And I structured that in kind of a body, mind, and spirit breakdown of how each of those kind of categories were affected. And I think for this discussion, I can go into each of those categories and add details for stuff that I probably didn't get a chance to go into in the written portion. But I also I have my notebook here, which was the only thing that I had with me, which is like a blank notebook and a pen. And I want to go kind of like one day at a time as well and just read through these, see if there's anything I specifically want to touch on. A lot of this stuff is just describing how I felt at the specific time, working through particular thoughts. But I had different things come up, obviously, as the days went on, and I spent a tremendous amount of time kind of just sitting still and thinking. So some of it interesting, some of it was just, things crossed your mind to address later, people to talk to, things to look up, Instagram pages to go reference, old YouTube videos to go look up. It was pretty interesting to watch how the mind wandered and capture some of it. I didn't go in with a particular structure like journal prompts, specific things that I was looking for, nor was I trying to log every thought that came through my mind. I felt like that would be a little bit of a tedious pursuit and take away from some of the space that I was hoping to get. On that Twitter thread, I posted the video I took just of myself talking about kind of what I was looking to get out of an experience like this the day before. And it was very open-ended. I didn't go in looking to heal a specific relationship, address a certain thing of my past, anything in specific. I was kind of just very open. I wrote down on the first day pretty quickly, after I got dropped off, the kind of intention that I set for myself. I wrote down open mind and heart, hear God, meet myself, and be here now, which I think is pretty open-ended. I think those were noble, and I tried my best to be open to all of those. And you can kind of even see in that writing where my mind was at, even at an unconscious level. I think I expected to have some sort of, divine whisper, meeting an angel, some sort of premonition or spiritual enlightening moment. And if you've read the thread, there isn't necessarily that, but I will go into that in a bit. But as far as how things went, when I immediately got dropped off, I turned the phone all the way off, locked it away in a drawer, and then I was just there alone. And I think the gravity really quickly set in on how extended it was going to be. I don't think I've ever in my life spent that much time, like 5 consecutive days, without seeing or talking to a single person ever. I don't know if I'll ever have that single type of experience again. And again, these are all things that sound kind of obvious. It's like, yeah, you're doing a silent retreat, you're going to be alone, but I just don't know that I had thought about it beforehand, or maybe there isn't a way to feel it until you're there, but it was just kind of wild to really set in and be like, wow, I'm actually going to do nothing for 5 days straight. And that was one of the bigger battles I fought. And I think it's a reason why I wanted to do it in the first place, was like I'd been so output focused specifically for the last 10 months or so while building my business in parallel to a full-time job, and then stepping into what I'm building now full-time. But even by extension, I think pretty much your entire life, once you start to be a conscious person, you get pretty quickly thrown into school, and then you're doing things in school. And then from there, it's set goals, accomplish things, live life, but it's very engaged. There's always inputs and outputs and goalposts, and you're kind of this input and output machine, I guess. We get caught up a lot, and I touched on this in the thread, on being human doings. We're very identified with the things that we're doing, whether that be student, whether that be athlete, whether that be brother. And I'll be uploading later this week a podcast I did with Winston. We touched on this about identity and ER words, writer, lawyer, and many of those things. When people ask, what do you do? It's one of the first things when you meet new people, what do you do? So it's kind of this meta principle where we, as, I hesitate to say society, it seems pretty global, but everyone's always curious onto what you do. And part of that is very innocent, like how do you spend your days? But I think also part of it is very programmed and very boxed in thinking, and it doesn't allow us to be very dynamic as our identity. I think there is so much more to a human being, both in the power of being present, and presence was another thing that I'll touch on for sure, but being present in the things that you are doing, the people that you're with, but even in the who you are, the I, the observer of your experience. I think we spend so much time in the doing that we don't get a lot of time to just be. And I think in the being, we find stillness, we find direction, we find clarity, we find God and spirit and all of that stuff. And it's really hard without a specific, rigorous, and consistent discipline of some sort, whether that be morning prayer, devotional, gratitude, weekly reflective practices, church, yoga, whatever. It could span running, long walks, but moments where we can be isolated to ourselves, or at least in quiet and still, and just really be in a moment. That's a pretty high level meta principle, but I think it's super important. And I think the people who struggle with things like anxiety or depression or overwhelm or burnout, these kind of mental constructs, if you were to observe their life, you would see a tremendous amount of mental time and attention in the doing and the wrapping up of their identity in the things that they're doing. So at a high level, this experience was to facilitate time for just being. And I'm somebody who has a lot of goals. I put content out now, and there's a lot that I want to do with my life. And I don't think it needs a total divorce from the things that we do. And that was another one of the major takeaways, which I'll definitely touch on as far as lifestyle design and intentionality with the things that we do. But whether your day-to-day is extremely intentional, or it's just wake up, get on your phone, go to work, get off work, watch Netflix, rinse, repeat, whatever level of consciousness you're at or intentionality with your lifestyle design, either way, both ends of the spectrum can really just get into the doing. And I do think it requires intentional stillness in some level. It's something that I try to start my day every day with a brief bit of gratitude, 3 things that I'm grateful for, and then a plan for what good I'm going to do that day. And then I have my weekly week in review kind of journaling thing, which I did this morning. I do it every Sunday morning, just write my thoughts, feelings about how the week went. And those are 2 things that keep me or help me stay more present in the things that I'm doing, and also give me that space to analyze, like on a weekly basis and even on a daily basis, what am I tremendously grateful for and in the moment that I don't need to be reaching and chasing for other things, because I know I have what I need right now. And then on the weekly level, how do I feel about what's going on? How do I feel about the things that I'm doing, the place that I am, the people that I'm interacting with? And if you do that every single week, it's like this ongoing conversation with yourself. And it's almost like checking in, a boss checking in with their team. Like, how do we feel about the projects we're doing? Do we need to make directional pivots? It's important to do that with yourself and your life, because your life is made up of the time that you spent. There's a Benjamin Franklin quote, time is the stuff life is made of. And so how you're spending it is your life. Like how you spend your time, the sum total of that is your life and your life story. So look at how you allocate it. Many things to go into. I've touched on some of this in previous podcasts about the 80-20 principle and lifestyle design, which I'll try to keep out of the discussion for today, but it's just something to greatly consider. And this time in my silent retreat and fast was that. So before I go into the day by day, which I'll just be kind of reading and picking stuff that I like or find kind of more idiosyncratically interesting, I'll do the body, mind, spirit breakdown and go over how things were. So for the body, for the physical, I want to highlight, as I did in the thread, that fasting is not extended fasts are not a healthy, maintainable way to facilitate weight loss. And that was in no way what I was looking to get out of it. And for those that saw the videos that I posted and the before and after, I mean, I think it was like 11 pounds between day 1 and day 2. I'm typically close to 200 pounds, trying to get slowly down to like 185, 190. So I can be kind of lean at the muscle mass that I have, but that's a relatively big person. And the bigger you are as a person, that means the more room you have to lose strictly water weight. I'm sure there was some fat breakdown, some muscle breakdown, but I've since, in the week time since ending it, it's been about a week since I was exiting the fast last week. I've gained it all back as far as weight. So don't, if you're somebody who's curious about doing an extended fast, don't do it with the intention of weight loss as a goal. One, I think that's kind of unhealthy. You're associating like starving yourself with weight loss or fat loss. But fasting is a very ancient practice. It's been exhibited across all of written and recorded cultures that we know of as a means for detoxification, purification, both physically and spiritually. I think fasting can heal many, if not all, diseases because you're letting your body do what it's designed to do. Now, that's not extremely allopathic or Western. It's a lot more of an Eastern idea, but I think when you take health as a holistic approach, fasting has a place for health and wellness in a very real way. I try to fast, do like a 24 to 30 hour fast around once a week. So I was already doing that decently consistently. And so I was used to it, but I'd never gone past probably the 30 to 36 hour mark, which is more or less just a day and then a sleep. So this was definitely an extended endeavor that I was interested to see how it would manifest as far as difficulty, feeling, etc. What was really cool is that, day 1 was as predicted. I've felt it before. You're pretty hungry, but you still have energy from all the food and calories that are in you from the day previous. And then you get around the 20 to 26 hour mark, you start to feel pretty more intensely hungry. And then you get kind of chilly, whatever. That's typically when you're going to bed, or at least for me. And then you sleep through it. The next morning would be where I would normally be breaking my fast, kind of that mid-morning the next day. And so rolled through that next day, low energy, not really feeling physically super great, but around the 36 to 40 hour mark was where I felt my body kind of, what I assume go into ketosis. Now, I wasn't using a continuous glucose monitor or any sort of blood work pre or post to know exactly what that time frame looks like. But as far as feeling, all of the stomach hunger and the kind of that fixation on food really disappeared, and you just enter this kind of lucid state where your body, based on what we understand about ketosis, is like using its fat stores as energy, as well as muscle glycogen, which is to put it simply, is like the energy stored in your muscles to do anaerobic exercise. So like when you're going to the gym, you're burning the carbohydrates that you've eaten, but also all of those carbohydrates that have been turned into glycogen that are in your muscles. So your body's going to start cooking off of that stuff, and hopefully, and obviously there's still digestion. As I noted in the thread, I took some psyllium husk as just an empty fiber source to try to hopefully push through and pull out the digestive system to kind of clear it out. I don't think it would be as effective as a true laxative and or, an enema or something to really kind of clean things entirely out. But I had not done anything like that. Also, none of this is medical advice, by the way. This is just my personal experience that I'm sharing. I think the psyllium husk was probably pretty helpful. Hard to know. I don't have a one-to-one doing it with or without. That was just some suggestions that I'd seen online. I also incorporated activated charcoal and bentonite clay as supplements that are good at binding to heavy metals in the body. I just figured because I was doing an extended fast, I could also do a bit of a detox. Now, I don't live a toxin-free life. I aspire to be as healthy as I can, but I'm still, I'll drink a bottled water that is in plastic or fill up a glass from the tap every once in a while. So I'm not perfect as much as I would like to and aspire to be as good as I can. It's not perfect. My life is not, like I said, entirely toxin free. So this wasn't to get to a place where I'll never touch a toxin again or live a non-toxic lifestyle. It's just directionally better things to be conscious and aware of. But that was the physical side. I'd say I felt actually fine hunger-wise until the last day, and I am going to assume it was entirely mental because I don't think there's just like a renaissance of physical hunger. But on that last day, I think it was because I realized I was close to breaking it, and I started to think about the meal itself and being excited to break it and get back to normalcy and start eating again. I got really, really hungry and uncomfortable that last day. Again, I think that was mental, but it was manifested in physical feelings. And then I think to amplify these effects, the whole week I slept pretty poorly. I think it wasn't due to the fast, although that certainly had its effect. I think the biggest difference was that I was doing comparatively nothing as far as output. I typically weight train 6 days a week and then have kind of a active mobility recovery day. I just love to train with relative intensity. So my body's used to that output as something that really tires me down. Also walking, I try to walk 10 to 15K steps a day if I can. And because of where I wasn't taking extended walks and I wasn't training. I could have done body weight stuff on like the deck of the cabin, and this isn't like a cope or excuse. I'm just telling you what I did. So because I didn't have that energy output, I think it really made it hard to be physically tired. And while by the end of the day, I would keep myself up from whenever I naturally woke up, which typically was like 7 to 7:30, and then go to bed between 7 and 7:30. I wasn't that tired, even though I was mentally kind of fatigued. I would just end up lying there staring at the ceiling for quite a while before I fell asleep. So the sleep was not ideal the whole week, except for one night. For whatever reason, I just slept like a rock. But most of the other nights were not great. So that kind of amplified this like lucid uncomfortableness. But overall, I think energy was maybe as I expected for a fast. You get kind of lightheaded if you stand up really quickly. You're not super energetic. But I do think that a lot of this stuff was because of the limited type of activities I was doing. I think if I was interacting with other people, if I had a practice to go to for a sport or a gym session with a partner, I think I could have dragged my body through it and been fine, but it was the lack of things to do and stimuli to distract me from the food that made it be this kind of overall uncomfortable experience physically. I think those are the major things to note about the physical experience. Oh, and then the backswing. I think my mistake, and if I ever do another longer extended fast, I will be very intentional about this on the back end, is if you think of your tank getting depleted slowly over 5 days as like an off ramp, like you're going down, 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 down to zero, both digestively, calorically, whatever, it's best practice to return with an equally long on ramp as you go back up to full and return your tank. I was decent about breaking the fast. I broke it with bone broth and berries and then waited an hour or two to let that settle, and then ate a little bit of steak and eggs. So that was fine. And then I waited most of the day to have another bigger dinner meal that night with my family, but that was like a normal sized meal. And then the rest of the week I've just been eating back to normal sized meals kind of pretty much immediately. And digestion has been all out of whack, even up and until and through today as I'm recording this. I've dealt with like decent constipation all week because I think your body it's like a starvation response from what I understand. And so it's holding on to stuff. There's also, as your body's getting replenished with electrolytes, water, and calories, your digestive system is demanding a lot of those resources. So as I've come up to fully hydrated levels, fully replenished levels, physically speaking. That's been kind of interesting. There's been kind of like a lot of bloating and distension in my gut. Again, this is kind of gross, and I've gone very technical here, so hopefully I haven't lost much of the audience. It'll get back to the interesting mental stuff as well soon. But that was something that I felt like is important to share for anyone who's endeavoring to do something physical like this. And this was my first time, so your experience might be relatively similar or analogous. So take your time when you break it. Be gentle and eat very little. Just like you ate nothing for 5 days, you should eat close to nothing and slowly, incrementally build that up to give yourself, quote unquote, a fighting chance. Now, I wasn't ill. I just was kind of uncomfortable throughout this week. And then workouts obviously suffered, especially on the front end as your muscle glycogen stores are getting replenished with the carbs you're eating. So very weak, very flat at the beginning of the week with those workouts. And the last 2 or 3 workouts have been a lot better. I've been able to push really hard, still dealing with some of that digestive stuff, but relatively back to normal, still alive and kicking, and an interesting experience to be sure. I definitely see myself doing extended fasts in the future. I think they're important to incorporate somewhat regularly, just with the way our bodies are designed. I don't think we should be in a constant state of consumption. So I will probably do other fasts of extended nature in the future. I don't know if I would push for a longer one. I probably would try something like that, just knowing myself. But I think as a semi-regular practice, I think the sweet spot, if I were to recommend to somebody who's either never done an extended fast or has only done like a 24-hour fast, I think like the 72-hour, like the 3-day is really ideal, because you let yourself drop into ketosis. You get to feel what that feels like, but it's not crazy extended where your stomach's going to start shrinking and, you know, you're going to deal with a lot of those longer term digestive stuff that I've kind of described. I think, again, not a doctor, but if you're dabbling in the world, give yourself a 3-day thing. And then also, I would not recommend pairing it with silence or no inputs. Like, let yourself read books, do things, talk to people, move around. It'll make the fast a lot easier and go by quicker. So that was the physical side. It was what it was. Harder than I anticipated, but like I said, amplified by the fact that there was no stimuli. And then as far as the mindset stuff, I kind of touched on where my head was at going into it, and whether unconsciously or subconsciously, and I guess I'll pair this with spirit just because the conversation kind of interconnects pretty well. I think on an unconscious, I knew consciously like I wasn't going to just have a vision of an angel coming down to me or have some sort of animal spirit in the woods come out of the woods and say something. But I think on an unconscious level, I was hoping for some sort of answer that you don't get in the day-to-day. And when that didn't come, you know, day 1, day 2, day 3, there was a little bit of a antagonistic conversation going on in my head where I was like, you know, first of all, like, what am I doing here? Is this really worth it? Is this a waste of time? And then, you know, is that coming? And am I doing something wrong? No, you need to be more present. Like, and because I'm not a seasoned monk or meditator, I wasn't able to just pass the day with, you know, 3-hour bouts of meditation. I tried some stillness stuff. A lot of it was just spent though sitting, and whether that be on the deck, just looking at the view, or in front of the fireplace, just watching the fire, letting my mind wander where it was. I tried to be as much of the observer as possible, not to judge the thoughts that I was having, but just observe them. And I think I struggled with wanting some sort of answer, wanting some sort of feeling, message, whatever. And then it wasn't until the week after, when I was kind of integrating my experience or kind of reflectively looking back, that I realized that the fact that none of those answers came is because that in and of itself is an answer, or is the answer as I'm taking it. Meaning, the way I have my life set up, the goals that I have for myself, how I'm holding myself in my life and my relationships, and the way that I'm healing my wounds, working on healing my relationships with my family, working on setting goals for myself, pacing myself mentally with the goals those that I'm chasing. Because I spend so much time already, and have in the past, analyzing, journaling, just time spent in my own head on walks, talking to other people, that life is set up in a way that is very congruent with what I am being called to do, at least at this moment, to the best of my ability to tap into direction, source, and intuition. So that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I wrote somewhere in here on to that effect where it's not actually a bad thing to want to get back to your life. I think people that live really quote unquote cool lives or lives that they love, they'll have probably this shared experience. And I don't know how many of you are this way, but I certainly, I love to take trips, travel the world, learn about things, but there's always that kind of excited feeling about like, gosh, I'm getting back. You get back to your zone, the comfort of your room as you've designed it, your life, your day-to-day, that routine. There is good comfort there. And I think there's in my opinion, a bit of an over pedestalization. Like we hold in very high regard the people that can just travel, live out of a backpack, not really have any structure, and just live extremely fluidly. And some people are very prone to that. Noah Ryan, I had Noah on this podcast earlier, and he's one of those people that like kind of seasonally migrates and is extremely nomadic. And I think there is no right or wrong, but I think knowing yourself is super important. And what I've come to realize about myself doing trips of various lengths in various places is that as much as I do love to explore and be in those other places, I'm the kind of person that would much more be enriched by a 3 to 6 month or even a year stay in a place where I can really build out that environment, that routine, and be settled, rather than the kind of run and gun experience. Like it really is super draining to me. And I just think I'm much more of a stable body, home body kind of person. I'm much more of a like build something cool and let people come to it rather than the explore chasing. And this will get into some things that I'm really looking to expand into in the next year and beyond with bigger projects, which I'm very excited to share to you guys when they're materialized in a more concrete way. But that is something that I am uniquely gifted at or prone to. And I think rather than beating yourself up for those things, you need to lean into what makes you special. That's a very meta principle. It can be carried into a lot of arenas of life, but instead of trying to be somebody else or be like somebody else or adopt the cool ways of somebody else just because you think it's cool or other people say it's cool, you'll find way more satisfaction and fulfillment over the long term just by leaning into what makes you extremely happy. I think on this side of the internet that I find myself on, there's a lot of amplification of the make a ton of money online, live in a fast city like LA, Miami, New York kind of thing, or Dubai, get nice cars, nice watches. And so when you consume a lot of that content, you're surrounded by people doing it, it can be very easy to just become a reflection of those desires. But it's really important to know what you want and also what you want to want. There's an article online you can read, I think it's called Knowing What You Want to Want. And it's worth a read because it's talking about the things that you want are a product, like I described, of the environment that you're consuming, what your other friends want. Me and Winston talk on this in the upcoming podcast as well. Like we kind of talked on like being a young man, and he's like, look, if my roommate is only focused on getting girls and chasing ass, like you're gonna be a product of that and you'll probably fall into that arena, and you can extend that to specific career goals, money, whatever. And he talked about being surrounded by, in college in his fraternity, a lot of people focused on the specific dream of like the Wall Street investment banking and consulting route. And so like he wanted that for a while, but he didn't want it. It was just the product of the environment. And so him knowing himself, he's designed his life very differently now as an artist, a writer, etc. And so it's important to align yourself with what you want to want, like what is called to you deeply. So if that means living a simpler life, a lower income life, but a life where you get to spend with the people you love, wake up, spend some time outside, whatever is very in alignment for you, that's what you need to look for. And these moments of stillness are where you're going to be able to get it. You have to step away from all the inputs, all the people talking about what they want, to really spend some time and figure out what you want. And it's an iterative process. Your wants are going to change over the span of your life, but live the time that you have the whole time through in alignment with who you are and what you want. And you'll find a lot of fulfillment along the road to each one of those goals that you're setting for yourself, but those are more like places along the way. And it's a trope. It's kind of annoying, but like the journey is the destination. Life is made up of the time. So don't wait to have some sort of internal sense of fulfillment or peace or whatever it is for those goals and those milestones, because everyone that has ever set a goal and achieved it realizes that the goal is not the fulfillment. There's the famous gold medal depression or gold medal syndrome with Olympic athletes where they get the gold medal finally, which is, they've dedicated their entire lives up until that point for this one specific goal to podium and hold gold for their country. They do. And then in the months and years following, there's kind of this deep sense of depression because typically on an unconscious level, there's this feeling or anticipation of when I get this, I'll be a champion and somehow things will be different and somehow I'll be more fulfilled. But even in the pinnacle of achievement, Olympic gold, they realize that it was the journey. It was the day in, the day out training. So don't let yourself not be present in the early morning practices, the late night mobility sessions, staying in, not drinking to make the sacrifices to win gold. That was the win. The gold was along the way. And that metaphor can be extended to everyone else who, including myself, is not chasing Olympic gold, but can be chasing X, Y, and Z goals in our life. Make sure that the life along the way is fulfilling the whole way through. I've definitely wandered a little bit, but that was one of the kind of high level things that I observed in my mind about really wanting to return to my life. And in the moment, I was like, no, you need to be more present. You need to be, more monk-like, really power of now, Eckhart Tolle, all this stuff, like be here now, experience the experience. And I tried my best, and I think I did a decent job of that. But wanting to get back from this complete isolation with no one, no internet access, no reading especially, all these things that I like to do in my life, have amazing conversations, create content, interact with people online, train really hard, eat amazing, enriching foods. It's not problematic to want to get back to a life that you love. You just need to make sure that the life that you live is one that you love. And to get back to the point at the beginning, many people aren't living those lives that they love because they haven't taken the pause. They haven't gotten out of the doing state. They're moving too fast to analyze whether they're moving in a direction that they want. If you think of life as a vector, meaning it has speed and direction, it's important to attack your goals with pace. But between the two, it's way more important to be aiming at the right thing. And it would suck a lot to get to 35, 45, 55, 65, 85 on your deathbed and have gone really far, really fast, and look back and be like, I missed it. I've talked earlier on this podcast about purpose and direction in the same way. And 1 degree difference over, 2 feet, you're not off by that part. You might be separated by a few inches, but 1 degree difference when you extend those lines out hundreds of miles or 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you're in another state. You're way, way, way off. And sometimes it's impossible to course correct or too late to course correct. Never mentally. Of course, you can always reframe your experience. But as far as aiming for goals that you want, making sure you're aligned with your quote unquote North Star is so important. So take time. Consistently is best. Somewhat regular, once a month, once a week, once a day, whatever the practice looks like for you. But analyze your goals and make sure you're actually aligned towards them, regardless of how quickly you're moving there. So yeah, I think that was the main takeaway at a very high level from the whole thing was like, I came in looking for a redirection, a new answer, a new direction, but the answer was in the absence of the answer, which is keep going. Just keep going. You're doing everything right. Just keep going, which is extremely encouraging for myself and exciting because I still am doing things that I'm very excited about. And the more time I spend doing it, the more people I meet along the way, the more excited I get about it. So that is an exciting prospect. And to those that feel like they're not in that place, all I can say is it's worth taking some time and direct attention to figure out what that is for you, because I can't give you this feeling. I can only encourage you to look for it for yourself and be excited when you get there. Like I just went on Ryan Ayala's podcast. Shout out Ryan. We just talked like yesterday or 2 days ago when we recorded about purpose, like what I feel like my purpose is. And nothing in the world fires me up more than other people finding theirs and acting in alignment of it. And, in a very high level way, just waking up to their own potential. Like, and conversely, the thing that disappoints me the most is when people don't see their own potential and or waste it. And it's less of the potential of you could be good at X, Y, and Z. Some people waste athletic potential by treating their bodies like shit, drinking, whatever. Like that is disappointing enough. But that's me projecting, I want you to be a great athlete because you have great physical genetics. But it's way more, I love to meet people who are on fire and passionate about what they're doing. The world needs more of it. And I think we all raise in energy and vibration when we're surrounded by people like that. So I want to create and facilitate that in as many people as I can before I die. I don't know when my time is called, but I know that doing things like this, speaking to whoever's listening right now, is part of that equation, because everybody's at a different point in time. And I consumed so many and still do thousands of hours of podcasts, hundreds and hundreds of books, and it got me to where I am now. So if I can be part of that symphony of ideas and let my voice be carried into that, I've done my job in my purpose. So enough of the soapbox, I guess. I'll get into kind of the day-to-day, see if there's anything in particular I want to touch on. It looks like on day one, I did a sort of dream building exercise where I was like writing out explicitly what a perfect life would look like. I talked about, I'm not a car guy, but like what would the perfect car look like? What are the material possessions, things that I want? I won't go into the whole list, but like the truck, all the tattoos I want to get, all the food I would buy. These are kind of things like, what would your life look like if money wasn't an object? I think it's important to visualize those so that you can feel the feelings of what it would be like to live those things, and also realize how close they are. A lot of these things on this list are not decades away from me, more like years or even months for some of them. So I think you should do a similar exercise. I've talked about goal setting before on this podcast. Will continue to in the future, but that was fun and something I entertained my mind with. I had a thought here, it looks like, on silence. Yeah, I noticed that when things are really, really quiet, you definitely do start to hear things like your mind. And so I wrote down here, I was curious if that is finally enough quiet for you to hear those things, or if it's actually your mind playing those tricks. I'm not sure what the answer is. Maybe it's a combination of both, but hearing voices in the distance, or like like an empty cabin all by yourself, completely in the middle of the night, you definitely hear things. And the question is it, the wildlife around you, or is it just your mind playing tricks? So an interesting one to think about. Day 2, I was talking about how satisfying it was to watch the fire, like rebuild the fire up to a big place and then watch it kind of get down to fully burned out. A lot of peace in that. Oh, and I was also realizing, and it's something I've thought about a while, but like mornings and nights for some reason are really excellent. Like the middle of the day is like, I think every moment of your day you can choose to make it amazing, but I always have found really great peace in like early mornings and late nights. A lot of creatives talk about getting their work done in those hours where the world is still still. Part of that I think is very mechanical and physical. Like many people are still asleep, so you actually have the kind of the quiet to just do things and be peaceful and output. But I also think that there's kind of a spiritual component of like, people becoming conscious and unconscious. It's almost like portals are opening, and in those openings of portals, creative ideas can kind of flow in. So that's one thing I thought about, is how I really enjoyed during the 5 days, even in the challenge that I found that the mornings were awesome up and until about like 11 a.m. And then I was like, damn, I'm really in this. And then it would suck until the sun started to set. I got to watch the sunset, and the evening kind of went into it, I would let the fire die out for the day. And anyway, I think an interesting high-level observation to think and implement in your life how you can maximize time spent in those windows in tremendous consciousness. I personally love mornings. I'm like a much more of a morning person than a night person, so I wake up early, and I love to do my deep creative work in the mornings. Oh, another thing is I noticed that I went in with no, daily routine. That the point was to break from this very stratified, organized life that I had. But even in this, I found myself creating routines even to the point where, and this might have been just something to entertain my mind, but I wrote down on a piece of paper, like what my daily routine was. It'd be like, wake up around this time. From that, like start the fire for the day, watch the sunset for an hour. I had this like brief window of sunshine on the deck where it would like break through the tree line, and then I would like lie out in the sun for that hour. And then as the day went on, I had these different deliverables, like brush teeth at this time. And it was like all of the things. I think a big part of that was just my mind trying to stay busy. But I think it speaks to how our minds are programmed for some sort of routine, and how routines can really augment and improve your life if you're intentional with it. I've done routine and habit setting stuff on this podcast before. It's one of my things that I'm passionate about, is like intentional lifestyle design. But it was really interesting to watch that come in, even in a space where I was like not focused on it at all. I ended up creating a routine anyway. So kind of an interesting learning there. Oh yeah. When I would struggle with getting hungry, I found myself thinking a ton about the breaking of the fast, foods I was excited to start eating, what that meal, I brought the one meal out there to cook and prepare, and I left it in the fridge all week. And then, early on in the first day, I set out the pots, pans, forks, knives. I basically prepped my cooking setup like days in advance. Again, I think part of that was like the hunger cope and also giving myself something to do. But that was really kind of interesting to observe, thinking in very specific gravity about the moment of breaking the fast and that final meal. I think it's very natural. That was one of those things that I antagonized myself about too. I was like, no, be present. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being excited about things in the future. And it also was one of those things that clearly there's an aspect to hope motivating us, the idea of something in the future. I think it's why we always end up setting these goals for ourselves. And in the very normal life for people who have 9-to-5s, you're working for the weekend. And obviously I am an advocate against that if that's not a lifestyle that you find yourself in a ton of congruence with. So don't let it be unconscious, but it's okay to be excited for things down the road. Like set these little milestones for yourself. Take yourself out on a solo dinner date so that like you're excited to get to the end of the week, whatever it may be, wherever you are, whether you have a partner, don't have a partner, you have an environment you love, you don't have an environment you love. Set these little goals for yourself, like create these little rituals, create these little goals and checkpoints, and you can make your life a lot more bearable. It's like the Nietzsche quote, a man with a why can bear any how. So if your life is hard right now, set even the smallest little checkpoints to give you joy and hope to work for. And then by the time you're getting close to that one, make sure that you have the next one. Because again, you're not going to find it in those moments, but it's in the pursuit of. So that was kind of interesting. It's like the whole week I was projecting to that end point, to breaking the fast, to getting to the finish line. And so I think in life, there is no finish line, but it's okay to have many finish lines along the way in your mind. Oh, I also, presence is one thing at the beginning of this podcast, I said I wanted to touch on. And I talked on my notes here about levels of presence. And again, we've already addressed the idea of like human doing versus human being. But I think there was like definitely a clear line I was noticing about being present in what you are doing. Like it's easier to be present in the task at hand, or if you're sitting down with one person at dinner, like be present with them. There's things that you can do to be present with them, like put the phone away, no other inputs, like be there. But I think there's like levels to presence where you're just truly like in the experience being. It may sound a little woo-woo, and I don't know how well articulated that thought is, but for anyone who's ever had like good breathwork sessions or meditation, and you've accessed that kind of feeling of like true presence, it's just interesting that there's levels to it. Like you can be very present in the actions that you're doing, and then the space that you're in, and the person you're talking to, the book you're reading. but there's like a deeper presence of like, I am here and now and only here and now and experiencing it. And like, these are the things that I feel and touch and breathe and smell. And anyway, maybe woo woo, but I noted it here. Started entertaining the mind here with some mental math. It looks like breaking down the calories my body was consuming on a daily basis. I think I was at like an energetic low point. So I was like seeing what the fuel reserves in my body were looking like. I also wrote down here, nothing is bad unless you give it permission to be so. A little bit of a perspective guy there. Took some note, and this is only, I'm getting now to day 3. So, I had an interesting controversial take here. I wouldn't say that social media isn't real life. I think that it's as you allow it to be. I'm reading now verbatim from my note. And I've had extremely real experiences because of it. It can elicit real relationships and emotions as well as physical stimuli. It just needs to be intentionally and consciously consumed. Now, that's a rabbit hole for another podcast. I've talked about curating your information diet. One of the earlier podcasts I did, maybe like episode 10, 9 is coming to mind, but I'm not sure if that's correct. But intentional consumption of social media and using it as a tool to meet really, really interesting people that can then become part of your reality. The lines, I think, as we move towards this AI metaverse world will be important to delineate for yourself. But to write off social media as not real life, I think is ignorant, because people are making real money with it. They're meeting real people that become partners, best friends, business partners, whatever. And now that I'm in that world, like some of my best friends right now in my day-to-day life, I only know through the internet and have yet to even meet in person. And I don't think that that's anything short of real. Like, because then it gets into simulation theory, like what even is reality? And I think those experiences are no less real than your day-to-day, the people you meet at your office. So don't write the power of the internet off. It's everything that you allow it to be. I did this exercise, it looks like later in day 3, as definitely something to entertain myself, but I think I was in a little bit of a negative headspace, and I've done this before as a way to curate some positivity about yourself. I wrote down 50 things I love about myself. And by the way, 50 is a lot. And so while I am probably on the more narcissistic, egotistical end of the spectrum, given that I have a podcast where I talk to myself, I think anyone can do this. And the point of doing a number like 50 is that pretty quickly you get out of the obvious. Like, I love my hair, I love my eyes. Like, some of those were my first, like blue eyes. I really like my blue eyes. But after, it looks like probably 10 to 13 things, you really start to get into character traits, and you have to look at yourself and search for things to be proud of. And you're affirming that positivity about yourself. And I think it's a really good way to curate some self-esteem and remind yourself that you are amazing. So that's a great way to just cultivate some positive self-relationship. And I don't know why I was at the time called to do it, but I did it. And I think it's a worthwhile practice, even if after you listen to this podcast, you're feeling kind of down about yourself, maybe dealing with some self-image issues, as we all have and do. Challenge yourself to write down 50 things that you love about yourself, and then review the list, like read back down and be like, damn, I actually am pretty awesome. It's a good one to do when you're coming out of a relationship. Maybe you feel like somebody didn't choose you, or maybe you're dealing with your sense of worth from childhood wounds. Maybe there wasn't a parent figure missing and you felt like a sense of abandonment, or people didn't pick me. Write down, reasons people should pick you, things that you love about yourself and that are obvious to love for others. Because a lot of these end up being things that you seek out in other people. And I think the way that we love ourselves is the way that we love other people. So the more that you can curate a sense of self-love, the more love you'll be able to put in the world. At the end of day 3, I wrote down, it's very interesting that getting to the end of each day feels like some sort of accomplishment. It's pretty interesting. And yeah, it goes back to kind of the set the finish lines. If you look at the end of every day as a checkpoint or as a win, it's guarantees you getting a win every single day. So you might be really tough in it right now, wherever you are, working a job you hate, in a tough relationship, whatever. Just getting one more day down, checking that box, that's a win. And if you treat it like that, you're going to start feeling like a winner. every morning I was lamenting how bad I was sleeping. Just whinging on the page. I wrote a note sometime in the middle of the day. I want to eat and do stuff again. Looks like I was having some ideations for things that I want to do later. A little bit of gratitude. And then I'm not super proud to admit, but it looks like day 4 and 5, I think part of it was approaching that endpoint, just really wanting to get back to it. But I actually ended up, just out of sheer boredom, drawing these crosswords. As if you're watching on video, you can see them. Like, they filled the entire page, and I started out just by drawing the grids. I was basically just drawing boxes connected to other boxes, and then I would write the word beginning into one that fit the word beginning, and then from there try to create branches and fill the whole page without, obviously I had no internet to look up words that fit. Anyway, I did pretty well. I know many words, as it turns out, but crazy that I had to just kind of, it was a great way to like kill like an hour or two. Just kind of a funny side effect of like not having anything to do. You create something for yourself. As this was a birthday endeavor, it looks like on the end of day 4, I wrote down 24 lessons that I learned in 24 years as kind of a stream of consciousness. So they're not in any sort of order. Maybe worthwhile to read here. Number 1, be kind always. Number 2, in life, you receive who you are, not what you want. Number 3, no answer is an answer. Number 4, discipline equals freedom. Number 5, reality is a mirror, in parentheses, with a delay. Number 6, all is mind, in parentheses, reality is a mental projection. Number 7, you become what you think about most of the time. Number 8, the best way to eat is like our ancestors. Number 9, walking is the best exercise. Number 10, the sun is my friend, / it's hard to be sad in the sun. Number 11, working for yourself is better than working for somebody else. Number 12, I really enjoy reading and writing. Number 13, life is a blessing. Number 14, you should sweat every day. Number 15, falling in love is worth it. Number 16, the beach is the best place to live. Number 17, I love to spend time alone. Number 18, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Number 19, your intuition is never wrong. Number 20, God and science are the same thing, just different words. 21, today is my entire life. Number 22, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Number 23, looking good makes life easier. And number 24, there is no direction, only divine redirection. So, like I said, stream of consciousness, but it's a solid list right there. Made me smile reading it, so hopefully it made you smile hearing it. Day 5, the final day. First thing I wrote, so glad it's the last day. I literally cannot wait to eat again. Oh, and this is something that I'm going to shout out Riley Lamont. I don't know if he listens to my podcast, but we're connected on Twitter. He's in the Irrational Optimist thing. Really interesting mind. I need to connect with him directly. So Riley, I'll be shooting you a DM soon. But he put out a tweet just yesterday about how important it is to have like physical mementos and totems and imbue them with your meaning by having them every day. And it's actually something I thought about pretty deeply in an important way when I was there. It kept coming up. And I'm going to read what I wrote here about that and then expound on it. But I said, I think one of my most fundamental obsessions is in imbuing things with meaning. I've always been obsessed with totems and mementos and think that is the same with the tattoos and any sort of storytelling and world building that I do now. Icons, logos, imagery, symbols, words, and especially physical things. All of it can, and I underlined can, have meaning. And to me, the potential, and then I underline this, demands that it does. I really think that this is my purpose, and by extension, helping others find meaning in themselves. And then I wrote other things, bags, small items, keys, and sharing stuff. And so it's something that is like really schizo and unique, I think, about me. But like since I was very little, I've loved using my hands to make things. I've talked on this podcast about like the desk that I have here that I'm speaking to you on. I made for myself in high school, the standing desk. I made this bed behind me. made that side table behind me, desk lamp, my wallet, that leather charging pad back there. Even my key ring is like paracorded out. Every backpack, I replace all the pull strings with paracord. Like, it's super schizo, but I love having everything in my life be like custom made, curated for myself, and like these little unique totems. And I think it's really important, especially as we move into this world that is so digital and metaverse and non-analog. Those little analog mementos are really important. I think there's something human about it. It, like, since the dawn of time, people have collected these little knickknacks and items, and it's not to be obsessed or attached to them, but it's just like in life. Everything is what you put meaning into it. And so you need to put meaning into yourself. You need to put meaning into your day-to-day. And those little tokens are super, totems and mementos are super important to me. And it's worthwhile having things like that for you, whether it's a necklace or a ring you wear. And then you can give those as mementos to your children. I don't know. It's just really, really important to me. So kind of weird that, and definitely a synchronicity that he talked about it and I had experienced it just the week prior. So interesting little thing, but I think imbuing meaning into life at large, but the things that we have around us is really important. And that's why I like buying used clothes, going to Goodwill as opposed to a store. Like, things have stories. There's energy in them. And if we can give them our own story and meaning, but also appreciate the energy that is stored in them, I think it can make life really kind of beautiful. Looks like another crossword here. And I did notice that the last day passed, relatively speaking, very fast. I think that had to do with my excitement for it ending, but I did notice that last day went really quick as comparison. And then I wrote at the bottom, as I already discussed with you guys, but biggest takeaway in major underline, keep going. And then, as I told you guys, I was kind of going through it physically. It looks like I was noting some nausea and stomach discomfort on that last night. And then that was it for my final day on the silent retreat. Yeah, so that was my experience. High level takeaway for myself personally, keep going with the path that I'm on. And then for anybody at home after this experience, I think a good question that I've been asked is like, do you recommend it? I honestly do not for most people. I think either one of them can be helpful for different reasons. I think if you find yourself really, really greatly consumed with your phone and just feel like you're always in consumption mode and it's just a lot and overwhelm, I think taking a quiet couple days, like give yourself a long weekend where you turn your phone off entirely, don't go on your phone, just read and hang out with your friends. That can be a great way to kind of purify that sense of overwhelm without the relative intensity of an experience like this. And that, I think that is very worthwhile doing. And then I think fasting, like I've alluded to, very healthy. I also want to caveat, if there are females in the audience, I know my audience is predominantly male, but females, you will react to fasting wildly different. Your hormones are way more of a mosaic, dynamic situation, and also just intrinsically more susceptible to stressors. So really be careful with any kind of fasting, period. I think men's bodies are just more resilient to stress. It's a physiological fact. And so if you're going to do fasting, please talk to and consult a physician, maybe even do blood work, especially looking at things like your thyroid ahead of and following. And there's a lot of great female creators that talk about the power of fasting. It doesn't mean you cannot do it. The human body is designed to go periods without food. It's okay. It's even arguably positive, but do your own research before just starving yourself, especially if you're taking some sort of ongoing medication, especially if you're on birth control, the things that are disrupting your natural endocrine system and all the stuff that's going on under the hood. Just be careful with it. And by extension, really anyone. I think anyone can be harmed by these things without the proper amount of preparation. So there's my medical caveat. Again, this is not medical advice. This is just my experience, but I know that when you share things that you do, people can get excited about them and might be interested in pursuing a similar experience. So if you plan to do any kind of fasting, do your research, and yeah. So I don't think I would recommend it, honestly, for a lot of people. And one last high level thing is I'm very excited, and I did touch on this in the thread, but I love this concept of entering every single year, whether it's something you do at the turn of the new year, calendar year, or your birthday. I like birthday because it's like you entered this world at a specific time. It's unique to your purpose, and it's when your year starts. So every year on my birthday, starting with this experience, I'm going to try to incorporate something really, really hard every year. Because I think if you just set the tone with overcoming difficulty, it's really hard to have a bad year after that. So I don't know what next year's challenge will be for me, but I do like that practice. I don't think it will be this specific type of thing again. Seek out your discomfort. Otherwise, discomfort will seek you out, and you might not always like its particular genre or flavor. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this. If you find any of this interesting, if you find my thoughts, words, or perspective on the world interesting, you can follow along myself. Twitter, I'm always rambling now, so at ZDSCHENKEN. That's also where you'll find the thread about my experience in written form. Look out for some awesome podcasts coming in the pipeline. I already alluded to Winston. Have a few more other really sick guests lined up. And yeah, you can follow along at Vitruvian Gentleman on Instagram. Follow on any of the platforms. Whatever you're listening to this on, go ahead and hit a follow. I don't really know how the following thing works on Apple Pods or Spotify, but I know you can do it. So give it a follow to get those updates whenever I do put stuff out. And subscribe on YouTube. I know I've been softly alluding to new types of content coming out, but there's like one very specific video I want to film that is not a podcast that I want to do in the next, I'll hold myself accountable and say, I'll do it in May. I'll do it in May. Sometime in May, I want to record and then edit and put out a video. I had a prompted idea for it when I got back from this experience. So there's that, different types of content coming to the channel. And then, as I also alluded to, much, much bigger project. One of the only goals I've ever had for a long time that has actually scared me, but I really want to embark on it in this next year in the name of Memento Mori and everything that I purport to stand by. I want to attack everything as it comes to me now while I still have the opportunity to touch it and attack it. And while I still am living this life, I want to do everything that I'm called to immediately and not delay for some sort of endpoint. So big project, both in magnitude and literal scale. So I'm not trying to oversell anything, but I'll give you guys more concrete details as those things come up. I'll keep you guys posted on social media of that project. And I don't know, life could get very different for me in the next year or two in a really exciting way, which I'm excited for. You guys are innately a part of it. Whoever made it this far, you mean everything to me. Message me with your thoughts, and you can DM me if there's anything like you're thinking about doing this experience and you want tips, advice, feelings, things I would do differently. Shoot them my way. I'd love to talk about weird experiences like this or even just life in general. It's like I said, I really do think that I'm operating within the realm of my purpose, and I feel it every single day. So beyond grateful to get to do that and that you guys are a part of it. I think I will leave it at that for this one. Remember, your time and attention are your most valuable resources. So thank you for spending a little of them with me today. Memento Mori, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian Man podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.